Hi, I'm Ruth Molman from the Farmington Hills Historic District Commission, and we're working on some oral history from the period between when we had farms and when we developed a suburban community here. And I'm here with Bill Hartsock, who has been mayor of Farmington and been very active in the community, who has brought his mother, who has some very interesting things to tell us about her background. Bill?
Well, thank you, Ruth. You had asked me to do a program on some history from my perspective, and I thought it would be interesting today to introduce my mother, and I think it would help to give you some perspective in terms of where I developed an interest in public service, because my mother started at a very young age as well, in the early 20s, when she graduated from nursing school and volunteered for the Army during World War II. And a few years ago, Tom Brokaw wrote the book, Our Greatest Generation, and he put some names and faces to events and made it very personal. And I think locally in our community, we have a number of people, like my mother, that have interesting histories to talk about, and specifically about World War II and what she was doing during that period of time, and how she got involved in some of the things that happened to her.
Well, fine. Let's take a break and you bring your mother in, please.
Lewis and Clark, great explorers. Hi, I'm Thomas Jefferson. Would you check out the West for me? Oh, sure. And they take their keelboat up the Missouri. Oh, Buffalo. Then they built Fort Mandan. They're at 1804. Made some friends along the way. I'm Secretary Will. Through the Columbia Gorge.
There are tons of ways to help with your kids' learning. Find the really good ones on connectforkids.org.
The sweet Pacific Ocean. Yeah!
You came to Farmington from Detroit?
Well, actually, I came from Ferndale. Well, I grew up in Ferndale, and then I went to, I graduated from Providence Hospital in 1942, and of course the war was on at that time, and they had invaded Poland, and things were getting really bad, and when I graduated from Providence, I went to Cadillac Motor, and the day that I was going to go to Cadillac Motor, I was going downtown to become a public health nurse, and I met one of the girls in my class, and she said, Annette, she said, they're hiring at Cadillac. And I said, well, where is it? She said, on Clark Avenue. So I took the streetcar, got on the wrong streetcar, but I had to walk from 4th Street to Clark Avenue, and finally came to Cadillac Motor. And then, so I was sitting there waiting, and one of the doctors that used to work with me at Cadillac was there, and so he said, what are you doing here? I said, I came for a job. So finally, Dr. Irvin took me in his office, and he said, well, I don't know. He said, you don't have any experience. I says, and if you don't hire me, I'm not going to get any experience. So anyway, he hired me. And so, but I wasn't there very long, not quite a year, and of course the war was getting more, they were now fighting in the Pacific, and so I decided to join the service, much against my mother's will, but I did, and I left for Camp McCoy, and then from Camp McCoy, after 2 weeks, I went to San Francisco, and they sent me to, I thought, I hope I don't go to the South Pacific, because that's where we're going to have, that'll be with the Japanese. I'd rather go to Europe, but you know, of course, they sent me to the South Pacific.
Of course.
So anyway, and when we were getting ready to go on board ship, I got the flu or something, and I thought, well, I can't get really sick. I've got to walk and get on that ship. So, because if I didn't, they'd leave me behind. And by this time, I had made acquaintance with some of the other nurses. So I got on board ship, and of course I was sick, and I thought, oh, I'm so seasick, I'm so seasick. And so I looked out the porthole, and we haven't even left the dock.
Oh.
So anyway, I landed in Brisbane. We finally, after we came home on the Hoboken, I don't know, yeah, we landed in Brisbane, and then so then from there, they sent us to Townsville. They put us on a train that had a potbelly stove, and we went, oh, it was terribly hot, because it was, by that time, of course, it was still, we were going into winter, but in Townsville, of course, the seasons are reversed. And then I was in Townsville for just a few months, and then 4 of us nurses were sent to New Guinea. They needed some nurses in New Guinea, so then they put us on a C-47. The C-47 caught fire, so then we had to land in Darwin, and then we had to be picked up by another plane, and we finally got to Port Moresby, and then we got to Dobadura. Well, we were checking in at Dobadura, and so this chief nurse was writing it down, and I thought, oh my gosh, these jungles, what have I got myself into? So the chief nurse was writing down, and she said, and your birthday? And I said, well, today is my birthday. And she didn't even say happy birthday or anything. She just went right on. And you know, at our house, we always made a big to-do about birthdays. You know? Sure. So anyway, I was there in New Guinea for, well, let me see, we were evacuation unit. And I was there for almost a year, and they finally sent me down for R&R. So we went down to Sydney, we went to Brisbane first. And this happened before I went up to New Guinea. But I went in Brisbane. I must tell you this, because this is something that happened to me. Of course, being a first lieutenant, I was a second lieutenant. I became a first lieutenant later on. But I was a second lieutenant, not used to people saluting us and everything. So we were going into the Lennon Hotel, and these 2 sergeants really stood at attention. I said to the other nurses with me, I said, boy, they're really saluting us, aren't they? And she said, yeah, they really are. And I turned around, and they kept still saluting, and I turned around, and who do we suppose was standing there? General MacArthur. They weren't saluting me. They were saluting General MacArthur. So anyway, so I was up in New Guinea, and of course I took care of the 1st Marine Division in the 5th Air Force, and people don't realize what war is, and I feel so sorry for these kids that are in Iraq and everything, because we had the heat, we had the bugs, in fact, when I had malaria, I was they had a thatched hut there, and I was having my breakfast, and while I was sitting there, a boa constrictor had come up the side of the shack that we were at, and I think that thing was about that far from me, and I slid out. I was in my pajamas and went screaming out of there, and the natives, they were cutting the kune grass out that would grow around there, and of course they killed the thing. But we had all those different things happen. But anyway, this one Marine that had been badly burned, I had been taking care of him for, several days and everything. It was time enough to take off his bandages. So it was quite a thing, because his face and everything was covered with bandages, and we were starting to peel it off of his face. And finally he looked up at me and he said, oh, that's what you look like. I said, what were you expecting, an American Beauty? Well, I tell you. So anyway, then we finally left New Guinea. I was in New Guinea for a while, and you just wouldn't believe, you just can't imagine. And I feel so sorry for the nurses in Vietnam, and I feel so sorry for the nurses in Iraq, because the heat is terrible. It gets real cold at night, but the heat during the daytime is unbelievable, And then we went from there. I went to from the Dutch East Indies. We boarded ship and we went to the Dutch East Indies, and then from the Dutch East Indies I went to Clark Field in Manila, which is at the base of Mount Pinatubo. And I was stationed there, and we were getting ready to go to Okinawa, and then the war ended. So then when the war ended, I came home, and I was stationed at Fitzsimmons in Denver, and I signed up to stay in. But I don't know, it must have been a miracle or something. They lost my records, like everything else. They lost my record. So they came by and they said, well, you have to sign again. And in the meantime, Dr. Irvin had sent me a telegram and said, because I was working at Cadillac Motor, he said, Annette, the war is over and it's time to come home. So I thought, like my mother said, for heaven's sakes, come on, don't sign up anymore. So I went back to Cadillac and became supervisor of nurses for 35 years. And that's where I met my husband, and that's how I have my son, Bill Hartsock.
You came to...
But there's a lot of things that I could tell you, many things about that experience, really.
It's you must have treated some very severe war wounds.
Oh, it was just terrible. You know what they would do? The Japanese would shoot. We had a lot of fellows with amputations, because the Japanese would shoot toward their lower extremities, because that took 2 soldiers to carry the other one back, so that eliminated 3 people. you know, and so we had a lot of young kids. There was one young boy that I was taking care of, and every time I'd come on duty and I'd say to him, "You look so young to me. I don't know how you ever got in service." And one day he said, "Lieutenant," he said, "I got to tell you," he said, "I'm only 16 years old." He said, "My mother signed and I got in service," but he was so young. And of course we had malaria and dengue fever. We had all the tropical diseases to contend with, you know. And then of course we had terrible. Well, you know, when we were in Manila at Clark Field, it was hot there too. And a lot of these kids they had abdominal wounds, and when they would, like when we changed their dressings, the maggots and everything, it was very difficult. It was very difficult. But you know, I was 23 years old, as I told you, it was my birthday. And when Bill made reference to his son being 23, you know, kids at 23 are a lot smarter than you think they are, you know. But when you get to be 82, but then you don't think about 23, I must have been such a kid, what was I doing over there, you know. But in the meantime, my sister joined the Navy and she stayed in Washington, D.C., so. Then I finally came home, as I say, I stayed at Cadillac Motor.
Was your sister a nurse too?
No, she worked in commerce. She worked in the Commerce Building in Washington. Yeah.
Did you have to have special training for the tropical diseases?
Well, not actually. You know, of course we got all our shots and everything else, but actually, no, we didn't really have any special training. Of course, I worked I loved emergency work, and of course, doing industrial nursing for Cadillac Motor, which we had about 8,000 people. But of course, during the war years, we had about 25,000 people, because we built the M5 tanks, because they were building tanks when I left for the service. And then when I came back, of course, there was a strike. They had that 4-month strike back in '46, and then we start building Cadillacs again. And at one time, Cadillacs, that was the only place that they built Cadillacs, was right there. So we used to, whenever there would be a movie star come, or somebody like Jerome Power, Snazzle Durrani came one time, and he got up in the telephone booth and pulled all the plugs, and those poor girls were all beside themselves. But we ever knew there was a celebrity coming. Well, of course, the medical department was right near the assembly line, so we nurses used to run out and see them. And then when the Saudi Arabia come with bought all these big convertibles and everything, so of course we used to see that. And Mary Kay with the pink Cadillacs, we used to go out and see the new cars, you know. But it was very interesting, really.
Was it special to make them pink?
Well, and Mary Kay, see, she had got pink Cadillacs because that was her color, you know. But who would buy anything like that? And when I said, who would ever make a pink car like that? Well, they said, that's Mary Kay products, you know. And so, but it was interesting. I really have had a busy life. Really, I have. I really, but I enjoy nursing, and I do like emergency work, and of course that was a lot of it in New Guinea and Dutch East Indies,
And taking care of them.
And so it got me the bug of traveling. I love to travel, and I went to China with Bill one year, and I went to the Holy Lands a couple of years ago, but since back surgery, it's kind of limited me a little bit, but I'm doing okay.
Now, did you do much in the community here?
Well, not as much as I would like to have had. Then I did something, of course, services with our church and that, but not too much in the community. I left that to Bill. He was doing it all.
He was doing it for the family.
Yeah,
Well, how is it you picked Farmington?
Well, I'll tell you, that's another thing. Why we came out there, first of all, we were looking for a school for Bill, and we were looking for a place a little farther out from Detroit. But one day, and we had gone, we went to Dearborn, and we went all over it, but Bill, my husband came home and said, how would you like to live in Farmington? I said, oh, that's so far away to go to work. And he said, well, there's a fellow at work, he's selling his house on Manning, and let's go and take a look at it. Well, we drove. I thought it was a long ways, you know. We came and I fell in love with it, and then I thought, well, and after I start going from our place to Cadillac, because I had to go down to Clark Street downtown, at first I thought, oh my goodness, it's so far now. I was wishing I'd moved farther out because the community started growing and it got bigger and so many changes. Even though I've only been here since '63, you know, of course that's a long time to be in the place too. But there's a lot of things that are different, you know, and I love Farmington. I love the flowers, the way they put, you know, the flowers on the sidewalks in the springtime. I love Farmington, I really do. And I don't think I love it as much as Bill seems to like it, but because I don't have to leave it. He had to, but I didn't have to. So I know I can stay here till the rest of my days, you know, as long as I can take care of myself, and I think I can.
Yeah. It's now, were there different shops than when you first came? How did
well, there's a lot, you know, there's a lot more restaurants since we came, and there's different places. There used to be, you know, there used to be different stores, and that like Federal's used to be here. Remember Federal store?
Oh, yes.
They don't, you know, there's a lot of different stores here now that have gone by the wayside, and then there's a lot of that come into the community. And the different bakeries now than they had before, and it's a lot different than 1963, you know. And as I say, some people don't think that's a long time to be in a community, but I think it is, you know, to be in one place.
You know, it's part of the community. Of course, you were Michigan born, and
Right. Well, I grew up in Ferndale, and went to St. James School there in Ferndale. But in Farmington was always at the end of 8 Mile Road. You know, when you came down the end of 8 Mile Road, you came into Farmington, and why it was a journey to come from my house to go to Farmington. You know, you went that far. That was a long ways away. But now, of course, it's how things have changed, you know.
Oh, what'd you do, take Grand River into work?
Right, yeah.
And that was,
sometimes I took the expressway.
well, this was, let's see now, they built the expressway while you were,
I took the expressway.
when you were
A
living
lot
there.
of times I would go right straight down Grand River, or down to, see, I had to go down Michigan Avenue, you know, and I'd cut across. I used to live in Warren, off Warren, and when I moved, that didn't take me long to get to work, just 15 minutes, but when I came to Farmington, it was a little farther. But I got used to it. You know, like everything else, you get used to it.
Did somebody come in to take care of your son, or he?
Well, I was very fortunate to have a lady take care of Bill. She took care of him, and he was just an infant until he went to school. And I think that's where he learned to like all the good Polish food. Because this gal was Polish, and the kielbasa and the stuffed cabbage and all that, you know, she always gave me supper before I came home, you know. I thought at first that I would have to not continue nursing because I couldn't find anyone that I wanted to leave my son with. I had to find out somebody that was reliable, and because I never miss work. And for poor Bill, I sent him to school many times, and I know I should have stayed home with him, but I sent him off to school because I had to go to work. But anyway, and she took care of him all those times, and then when he went to school at St. Suzanne's, of course, I was home at 3:30, so I always had the early shift because I was supervisor, so I could get home from 7 to 3:30, you know.
You know, and working moms.
Yeah, it really is. It worked out really well.
And it's nice that your husband was in the same.
Yes, well, I met
company.
him there at Cadillac. Yeah, he was interested. He was interested in politics too, as Bill said. But in fact, I think he took Bill down to see Humphreys one time, and he met. Bill met the Governor Williams, that used to be governor of Michigan. You know.
Soapy?
Yeah, Soapy Williams. He met him. And so I think when we used to discuss politics a lot at the supper table, you know, and I think that's where Bill got inspired by it. I was never too inspired, but we were very supportive of it. We used to stand out in the rain while Bill was running for office. Before we'd go to work, we'd stand there and pass out leaflets and everything else to get him elected. I never thought a child of 23, but that's what he wanted. So, and of course, Bill was our only child, so therefore it was, you know.
You know, you need the support of the family to do that.
Yeah.
That's good. You, of course, didn't have any time for the women's clubs, or did you?
No, I didn't. I really didn't. No. In fact, when Lowell used to sit out on the front porch lots of times when we get home from work, and he'd say, "Annette, I think you're antisocial. You don't know." I said, "You talk to the neighbors. I've got to do my work inside." So I really didn't have too much time to do, although I had a lot of friends. But, you know, when you work all day and it doesn't, you know,
It's
have
a lot.
much time to do extra activities.
Yeah, and take care of a house and a child and all.
And that's not too bad. The lady across the street had 10 children, so therefore, but she didn't work. But however, when I say she didn't work, she worked plenty with 10 children. But when you have one child and go to work, you still have a lot to do.
You had a lot of playmates then.
Right. You're right.
Did you pick one especially?
Not particularly, no.
The whole group. They were his age?
Yeah.
It makes a nice neighborhood when they.
Yeah, so we lived on Manning, and that's the old Warner Farms. I think that was what used to be Warner Farms. You know, those houses that I'm living in now were built in 1955.
And the parks? Did you use many of the parks here?
Yes, in fact, when Bill was mayor, he had put that track in the park. Our park here in Farmington is beautiful, right there on Shiawassee. And in fact, we used to use it a lot for picnics, you know, go over there on picnics and everything. That's a beautiful park with the fence and the stuff, and it's used a lot. I see it when I go to mass in the morning, and I see a lot of people out there running on that track that Bill had made when he was mayor. I know he was instrumental in doing that, you know. And because Farmington's a pretty place, and you know, I don't know who takes care of all the flowers, but I wish I could thank them, because every time I go through Farmington and see all those pretty flowers, and they're always kept up so pretty and so different, you know.
Yeah,
And people, when they come to Farmington, comment on that, how nice that it is. And now that we've got the orange barrels off of Shiawassee.
Oh, that was a
That
mess.
was cute, wasn't it? How Mary Bush and the gang in the Walter Sundquist, they put the barrel in the hearse, you know, and that was really cute.
They put it in his
Yeah, I
hearse.
thought that was cute, yeah. So there you go.
I noticed some of them were still out there the other day.
Yeah, well, I think they didn't take it around, they didn't take the barrels off around that little centerpiece. You know, I couldn't figure out how they were gonna do that, but you know, I thought, well, they must know what they're doing, but I didn't think there'd be enough space there, you know, to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, they have to improve the roads. It's a continuous
Right,
process.
right,
It seems
right.
like they just improve one and then they're down the road improving it somewhere else. Makes it very nice. Well,
You know, one thing I want to say too is anybody that has anybody in service, please send them a box of something, either pretzels in a can, or don't send chocolates because in Iraq it's too hot. But you have no idea how we love to get mail. You know, write them a letter. You know, you know, I used to watch the nurses. That I got a lot of mail because I used to write a lot too, for that matter. But I had a lot of relatives. My mother's French Canadian, and we had a lot of relatives, and they all wrote to me. One time, my cousin sent me a box, and she had put jam in it. And you know what we did? We put 4 cans underneath our cots to keep the ants off, so that they wouldn't get up up into our bed. So we put 4 cans, and then we had a bar for the mosquito netting over it. And what happened was my mosquito bed hit the canvas of my tent. I came off duty that night, and I had this package, and it was on my bed, and I just put it on my orange crate, where my other stuff was. And I got into bed, and all of a sudden I thought, what the heck's the matter? And I felt something crawling all over me, and I finally got up, and we had one light bulb, and I was two doors down. I put the light on. There was thousands of ants that the box had broken that my cousin had sent me with the jam, and these ants had crawled up, those little dickens, and they crawled up on the side of the tent because the bar hit the canvas, and they got into and I had thousands of red ants. Well, I'll tell you, if you don't think I had everybody else awake in that place, you can imagine, you know.
well, you've done so much for the community and contributed so much. It's just wonderful.
Well, I've enjoyed very much, and I'm very honored to have you even ask me.
Well, I'm pleased that you came, and thank you so much. And thanks
You're
to
welcome, Ruth.
Bill for bringing you.
Thank you very much.